We're going to cover in this video everything you want to know about fin fillets, those little fairings down in the corner between the tube and the fin. So that's what we're going to talk about today.
Welcome to Advanced Construction Videos, where we show you how to tackle rocketry building techniques and more. On our website, we sell kits, motors, building supplies, and electronics. So come and learn, shop, build, and fly when you visit us at apogeerockets.com.
Hi, I'm Tim Van Milligan from Apogee Components. Today we're going to talk about fin fillets. Now this can be a topic that you can go really deep into, and that's what we're going to do. And I hope not to make it too complicated, because it doesn't need to be complicated, but you can go deep into it. So first, let me tell you, the recommended method of making fin fillets on a typical model rocket. And on this rocket right here, I have, you can kind of see the yellow right there. That's the fin fillet, and that's made out of wood glue. Just regular wood glue that you get at the hardware store. And the reason for that, like on this fin right here, it looks like it's pretty snug. But if you look carefully, there's a little bit of a gap underneath this fin. In fact, I can get a razor blade into that gap, which tells me that there's not enough glue on the fin, even though it feels pretty strong. So the purpose of the fin fillet, the kind that we recommend for most model rocket kits, is just a swipe of glue along the outside to fill any of those gaps. And I'll show you how to do that real quick before we get into the meat and the potatoes of this talk. Because I want to just show you, just to get it out of the way, because we're going to get really complicated here. So basically, I'm just going to take the glue bottle and just put a bead of glue. You can see it's a nice bead of glue right there on each side of the fin, like that. And then I'm going to take my finger and I'm going to just swipe along and pull off all the excess glue. And what that does, it pulls off anything that's excess, and also it forces glue into that crack. And so that will make that fin nice and strong. So now on this fin right here, the glue is now dry. And then now it's really strong. So that is, for most model rocket kits, the kind of fillets that we recommend. In fact, all of our instructions say do that. That's kind of like the minimum. So now let's get into, everybody asks, what's the best way to make a fin fillet? And the answer is, it depends, and because there are 5 variables, and I've written them down here, and we're going to talk about all these. The 5 variables that you might consider when making a fin fillet. The first one is structural. How strong do you want it to be? The second variable is aerodynamics. Another benefit of a fin fillet is it smooths out the airflow and makes less drag on the rocket so it can fly higher. So you do want to consider that. The third thing is the aesthetics. How pretty it looks. This rocket down here, these are some really pretty fin fillets. It almost looks like the fin is like a tree and it grew out of the tube. It's like you can't tell where the fin stops and the tube starts, and that's aesthetics. That's how it looks. And that's important in rocketry, especially in hobby rocketry, where a lot of the times what we're doing is we're flying based on aesthetics. And then the fourth one is weight. When we add a fin fillet, unfortunately, we're adding weight to the rocket. And the type of fin fillet and how thick you make it adds more weight. Weight does 2 things. One is it makes the rocket heavier, so it's not going to fly as high. And the second thing is that weight is in the wrong spot. It's at the back end of the rocket, and that moves the center of gravity where the rocket balances to the back. And we want actually the weight at the front, at the nose cone. And this is for stability. You know, a rocket where the weight is in the front is more stable, and it's going to fly straighter and more predictable. And that's important. But the fin fillet adds weight, and it's going to move the center of gravity back, which is not so desirable. And then finally we have cost. What is it going to cost us to put this fin fillet on? Not only in the material cost, you know, what we're going to use, but also in time and convenience. You have to consider those when you're making fillets. And so because there are 5 different variables, it gets really hard to say what is the absolute best. So I just want to present the information to you, and I'll let you decide what's best for your situation. So now down here at the bottom, we have a view of the rocket from the back end. We're just looking at it from the back. So when we're talking about making a fillet, what we're going to do, you know, we have a fin. Oops, I just took away part of my tube. This is dry erase, and I just dry erased some of it. So I'll draw a fillet, and there's a couple of ways we can make fillets, but in general, fin fillet is going to be a line of material. So if I'm looking at it from the back end, this is all material, whether it be glue, epoxy, or something else in there to strengthen this fin. Now this one is drawn as a triangle, but if you have to make a fin fillet, like I did on the one I just made, I made it curved. So it actually, oops, that's a bad one. We want it to curve across the fin instead of being a straight line. And the reason for this, and this is where the aerodynamics come in, wherever you have a sharp edge, you're going to get turbulence in that area. And so when we make it a triangle shape, we have 2 sharp edges. We have one here, one here. But if it's a nice curve that conforms to the tube and to the fin, we don't have any turbulence in those edges. And so when you make a fin fillet, that's what you want to do. You want to make it nice and smooth from the fin to the tube. So there's like I said, there's a lot of things that you can do. So that is for aerodynamics. But if you want just strength, first of all, you know, we want the strength so that the fin doesn't break. And we've all had situations where it's like this rocket right here. Oops, I pulled the nose cone off instead of pulling the display stand out. Okay, so here we have, you know, you can see that there's that joint looks nice and smooth, but if I flip it over, you can see that this one is cracked. And no one likes to have a cracked fin because it's structurally, it's weak. That fin could flutter and come completely off, making the rocket go crazy. So that's what we want to avoid. And so from the structural point of view, how can we make the strongest fin joint? Well, obviously, it depends on the thickness of the fin. So that's where your starting point. So if you want something that's super strong, you know, if I make another fin right here, and this fin is really fat, it's a crooked fin, but you can see the stronger, the more surface area right here compared to this one right here, this is stronger. So if you make your fin fillets wide, it's going to add a lot more strength. You don't have to make them triangular. You don't have to make them curved like this. You can also take just other pieces of wood and you can glue it to each side of the fin. And what that does is it just increases the amount of surface area that the fin bonds to the tube. And that's what you might want to do. People always ask, you know, what's the best material that you should use? What kind of glue or epoxy you should use to make a fin fillet? And the answer to that is it doesn't really matter that much because the glue is always stronger than the weakest part of the joint. Now, on this one right here, I've already glued this fin and it's dry, and I'm going to snap it off and we'll look at what broke first. So I'm going to take it, I'm just going to, oh, this one's glued on really good. It doesn't even want to come off. You see the glue, I'm bending the tube. The glue is holding really well, and eventually, if I bend it back enough, you can see what broke. And if you look at this closely, the fin fillet is still there on the fin. What broke here was the tube itself. And you can see, if you look at this, this is all paper right there. It actually delaminated the paper. See, these tubes are made up of multiple layers of paper. And each layer of paper is made up of fibers, and it's kind of like strings of wood. And we're actually tearing that. So the glue is actually a lot stronger than the paper. So it's not really of a question of what type of glue you use. It's how much surface area that glue is attached to. So again, let me start erasing this. I'll redraw it. So we have the tube right there. We have the fin coming out. And so if we make our fin fillet, we want to encapsulate as much of the tube as possible. So ideally you want to have your fin fillet go out pretty far as opposed to like right there. Because we're encapsulating, we're covering up the paper, making the paper harder to tear. So, you know, this fin fillet, even though like right here is the same amount of fin material or fillet material as in this side, this one, it's stretched a long way over the tube. Now this is when we're using paper tubes. And for most model rockets, we use paper because paper is actually a great material for making rockets. Paper is lightweight and we want our rockets to go high. Paper is also biodegradable. Paper is cheap compared to other materials like fiberglass or carbon fiber. So paper has a lot of advantages, and that's why we use it. But the disadvantage is it will delaminate first. So from a structural point of view, make your fin fillets wide. So if I were to make a new fin fillet here, I'll show you how I would do that. Again, I would put it in there, smooth it out, and then take this and make it even wider. See now, see that the edge of my glue is way out there. And that's going to protect that paper so the paper is harder to tear. So that is like the first kind of fillet, or what you can do to make your fin fillets a little stronger. The disadvantage of this is that aesthetically it's not as pleasing, because when you paint over it, you're going to see that ridge. You know, when you drag your finger across, it looks smooth now, but when the glue dries, it's going to be a little bit lumpy. But there's ways to take care of that, and we'll get into some of that. Let's see, what else can we talk about? So how big of your fin fillet should you make? So here I made them pretty tight. On some rockets, the fin fillets are really big. You know, they could be like this. And a good example of that is the V2 rocket. And so over here I have a V2. I've been stealing these from our display area. The V2, if you look at it, and I don't know if this is going to be easy or hard to see, but down here, this really curves a long way over the tube. It's kind of like this right here, where the fin fillet is really thick. And for aerodynamics, that's really good, but on the downside, it's also heavy. So there's a trade-off that you have to make. As I said, I don't know the optimum size of fin fillet that you should make as far as aerodynamics go, as far as drag reduction. It's really hard to actually determine that, because it's, you know, you could put a fin fillet and launch the rocket and measure out how high it goes, and then you could make a bigger one and do the same thing, but now you're adding weight. And so that weight is going to make the rocket fly lower, but at the same time, it might be reducing the drag, making the rocket go higher. And you don't know. And then also, every time you launch, there could be other factors that affect the trajectory of the rocket, making the rocket like go in different directions. And you don't know what caused it. So determining the exact size fin fillet to make is really hard. I think eventually, as computer algorithms get better, we're going to be able to predict it better by doing it inside of a computer, doing experiments inside of a computer where everything is perfect. But we're not quite there yet. We're getting there, but we're not there yet. All right, so that is the first kind of glue that I use for making fin fillets, and I like wood glue a lot because it's very safe to use. And you can see I could get it on my hands and I'm not worried about it. It washes right off. Now there are other kinds of glues that you can use to make a fin fillet, and when you do that, now you're going to want to protect your hands. So here I've got some gloves, and I'm missing my super glue. So I'm going to pause here. I'm going to get my super glue, and I'm going to make a fin fillet out of super glue. So I'm going to stop and be right back. Okay, I'm back. So I'm going to show you how to put on a super glue fin fillet. A lot of people ask, can you use super glue as a fin fillet? The answer is yes. First, I would glue the fin onto your rocket like this. I always use a fin jig because it gives you the nice straightest fins, and they're nice evenly spaced around the tube. But this doesn't have a fin fillet on. When you're using super glue will stick to your skin. In fact, it will stick to your rubber glove. So I can't even touch super glue with a rubber glove. When you touch super glue, you want to use a plastic bag, like a polyethylene bag like this. And you want to use either a medium or a thick super glue. I like the medium, but I know a lot of people like the extra thick. The advantage is the thicker the material, the less it's going to sag. By sag, I mean it runs off. So I'll do one with the gap filling. So I'm going to take the super glue and again run a bead of glue along the joint like that. And if I hold it down like this, it's going to start running off, and I'm getting a drip like that. And that's what we want to avoid. But then you're going to take a plastic baggie, stick your finger in it like that, and then do that same technique, wipe it off, and that gives you the proper amount that will adhere and keep the fin on nice and tight. You can also, with super glue, the advantage is you can accelerate the cure and it will bond almost instantly. So this is called Instaset. I call it Kicker. And you just spray it, and in seconds it will be rock hard. So it's probably already hard, but this Instaset left a little bit of residue, kind of a liquid residue on it. And so that's what the paper towel is, just to take that off. But at this point it's dry and it's hard, and it worked. So on this side, let's put a thick one down. So this is a lot thicker, and so it's not gonna sag as much. So I put it on. You know, it will sag a little bit, and it will bond rubber. And again, I'm going to take a plastic baggie because I don't want to touch it with my hands, and I can take it off like that. And this one left, it's really hard to see because it's so clear, but it left a big line of glue along the outside, so I want to take and wipe some of that off. And so now I have a fillet on there, and again I can hit it with the Instaset. Wait a few seconds, and it should be hard by now, and wipe it off. And now that has made a nice fillet. The downside of this, it doesn't flow as nicely as regular wood glue, so it might be a little bit rougher than a wood glue fin fillet. To take care of that, you're going to need to sand it and sand it smooth. Remember, the Aerodynamics, we want everything nice and smooth. When I rub my finger over it, I can feel it. It feels like a little bit like sandpaper. So to take care of that, you need to sand it. You can either use, at Apogee we sell our tea, a sanding tea, and one of the features on this tea is it has a nice big fat round edge on one of the edges. This one is skinny, this one has a rounded edge, and when you wrap sandpaper around it, you get a nice radius. And with that radius, you can come in here and sand that fillet. And you're going to get a nice even fillet all the way across. And you know, you'll just keep sanding it until it feels nice and smooth, like that. And what I do is, you know, I'm looking at it and I'm kind of, you know, tilting it back and forth, looking at the light hitting it. And if it's shiny, you know, if it reflects light back at me, like it's nice and shiny, that means I haven't sanded it, and that's a low spot. And so I would just keep sanding until I got a nice uniform color or surface texture. You can also use needle files. This is one here that we sell at Apogee. And again, you can take that, and this one's a round one. So I can take that and I can sand into there with that needle file, and you can also, you know, go across the wood. I like the round files because it doesn't have an edge to gouge. And if you spin it as you're sanding it, that kind of helps prevent digging into the surface of the wood. And files do come in different sizes. I have a different file set here. You know, you can see that this one is fat, this one is skinny. Again, for this one I would use particularly on a high power rocket where the fin fillet is a lot thicker. So that is a super glue fin fillet. It does work. The material cost on super glue is more expensive, so again, we're weighing the variables here. The next thing you might want to use is epoxy. We have a 15-minute cure epoxy like this right here, and I thought I had some mixing cups, and I forgot my mixing cups, but I can use a plastic bag. You want to take an equal amount of each part. In fact, I would like to actually do it on the inside of the bag because I want to use the bag as an applicator. Let's see if I can do this. I'm going to cut off one edge like this, and I'm going to mix on the inside of this. So again, let's try this. Let's see if this works. I'm experimenting right here in front of the camera. I gotta wait for my epoxy to get down to the bottom. Okay, so I got equal parts of A and B. Now this has kind of an ammonia smell to it. That's one of the drawbacks of epoxy, that like liquid epoxy. And I want to mix this up. Let's see if I did this right. Okay. And now I'm going to take my epoxy and I'm going to slide it into one corner. Okay, so I'm going to pick up my bag. You can see it's all into one corner. I'm making a mess of my table here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut off this corner like that. Okay, so here's another rocket. And now I'm going to take this bag, and this is kind of like, you know, a cake decorator where you can squeeze it out. You can see I squeezed out too much. But again, similar to what we did before, just run your finger across there. This, you can, you know, use a rubber glove. And the advantage of this liquid epoxy is it does flow a little bit. This is going to take about 15 minutes to harden. But while it's sitting here, it's kind of flowing. And so, but you do need to like hold it over the edge of the table like this so that it flows down into the corner. So if I did one over here on this side, what's happening is over here on this side, this one would be drooping down. So you can only do like one set of fins at a time. And again, you know, smooth it out the best you can. And when this hardens, this is going to look kind of like this one right here. It's nice and hard. It's very shiny. It's not going to take a lot of sanding, except for to feather out the edges a little bit. So I'm going to pause here, and then we'll talk about some of the other epoxies that you can use to make fin fillets. So we'll see you then.